right. So a couple of announcements. We're going to dive into the monthly webinar agenda. Now, one thing that I want to make sure that we talk about and continue to focus on is the trophy that is at the bottom right of the newsletter. It is super, super helpful to make sure that we're highlighting those fieldbook documentation pros that are your teammates and colleagues. We want to hear from you. We want to know how things are working and who is doing it really well. So be sure to leverage that trophy at the bottom right of the newsletter so we can get those Headlight Hero nominations in and give them the spotlight that's readily deserved. So don't forget about that. And thank you to those that nominated for this month, but let's continue to put the effort in to showcase those that are doing really well out in the field. And I'd also like to say, as a Louisiana native, you'll hear this over and over time and time again from me. I appreciate all that you are doing to make our roadways safer and more efficient. I drive them every single day, so thank you for your hard work and dedication to our state. I appreciate you if no one else says it. All right. Now, we are going to dive into Fieldbook Web. I have a quick demonstration here, a fairly new update for our search filter, and I'm going to share with you in just a moment. And hopefully it's an update that should make things a whole lot simpler for you on your end. And I also want to mention that this is interactive. You do not just have to sit here and listen to me talk. If you have any questions or anything that pops up along the way, be sure to come off mute and let's talk about it. You did not have to wait for a special opportunity to ask questions or to jump in. Okay, screen share working? All right, perfect. So on Fieldbook Web, if you are in an active project or any other project, let's see if we have some. Hold on, I'm kind of having a delay. Okay, so and I may have to log out and log back in, but on Fieldbook Web, when you are wanting to search for something that previously our search filter, when you were searching for certain labels and or tags, the functionality here was or. So for example, we could search contractor or piece of equipment for a certain date range or time frame. Now we have the and option. So when we're leveraging the search filter, we can search by contractor, we can search and filter by the line item, equipment type, and or tag, and narrow our fields down. So it's really helpful using this feature because it's going to make your cut your time down a lot when you're looking for specific items, whether it comes to claim mitigations or just being much more efficient overall. And unfortunately, it's not working properly on my end for right now. But I'll get back to the demo in just a moment. But it'll make things much more simple as far as efficiency is concerned with being able to search and narrow down and items versus or. Any questions there? And I'm going to log back out and log back in and figure out what's happening on my end. But any questions there about the search filter and how we're now able to search for multiple items at a time versus just one? All right, perfect. Now, another quick thing that I wanted to call out is that we had received some reports that there were a few issues related to samples not getting imported from Site Manager. And we realized that they were being imported with no project information. And that seemed to be affecting all of the samples that were being imported from Site Manager. So this has been addressed by our teams. So now all samples should have the correct ID and project, and it'll be imported into HeadLight with no issues. So if you're still running into that problem, or if you see that issue arises again, please flag that for me, because a fix has been released on our end to solve that for you. Any questions there? All right. Next, I wanted to address the materials dashboard. This is another update. So we were receiving reports that samples were not being filtered correctly by projects. This has also been fixed. So now all samples should be filtered by the project that you've selected via the project change button at the top, or change project button at the top. Any questions? All right. Now, something else I want to mention, and this one is a little bit more lengthy, so I'm going to move a little bit slower with this one. So this is another issue that was reported with the materials app that came up, I think, this past Friday or so. We're actively working on a fix to get users back up and running with the materials forms. Right now, they cannot be created via the app. However, we're currently working on that. Now, here's a workaround for that. We can use the web version from your iPad if needed to create the form on the web. And just know that we are hoping to get a fix out soon, but we're working on it. We thought we would have had something that would have been released by yesterday, but we ran into a few hangups there, and our team is actively working on getting that fixed via the materials app itself, so you don't have to rely on web. But for now, we ask that you please continue to use the web application to get those updated. And that short-term fix may require you to log out and log back in to reset things so that you're able to properly do it via the web. And again, long-term fix will be that you'll need to install a new version of the materials app, but I'll provide all of those details as soon as I have them and as soon as the permanent fix is there. Any questions? All right, awesome. Now, I again want to highlight, and I know I talked about this at the beginning of the call, but if you haven't had a chance yet, I urge you or implore you to go back to the e-construction newsletter that Les sent out, because the HeadLight Hero is actually highlighted there. I know on the last call I had some examples and photos and things like that. Photos of observations that our last HeadLight Hero had made, but this one is a lot more extensive because Les has tons of photos and a complete write-up about Jamie Barrios. So I implore you to go to the e-construction newsletter to check out the entire write-up on Jamie and see the awesome work that's being done out in the field with HeadLight. All right. So next we're going to dive into tips and tricks. I'm going to put this in the chat. I want to make sure that everyone has the latest version of Fieldbook downloaded. Please, please, please double check which version of Fieldbook that you have downloaded. It's essential to making sure that your platforms are working correctly. I also want to point out the latest version of iOS for Apple products that's out. Please, please, please go in on those iPads and ensure that you have the latest version of iOS downloaded as well. Those all work interchangeably to ensure that things are operating properly. And one other quick thing that I want to mention as far as a quick tip, it seems like it surfaces every now and then, especially for those of you that are taking tons of photos, tons of videos, and things like that on uh, during your observations when you're in the field. I would advise if you feel that or getting notifications that your storage is starting to fill up on your iPad, if you run into that issue and or when you run into that issue, we advise deleting photos from the Headlight photo album. So when you take photos with your iPad, they're automatically being sent to a Headlight photo album in your photo storage. So when those things start to get a little bit more bulky, especially depending on the video size and length of them and or the amount of pictures that you have, we advise just going in and deleting those, of course, because they're already saved and secure in the Fieldbook app under your observations, and that'll assist with freeing up storage for you. Any questions there? All right, sounds good. Les, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Thanks, Phoenicia.
Of
So I do
course.
have one question that maybe it would be good to let everybody know. So is there an
Sure.
update on replacing the 2021 iPads? I don't even know that we've mentioned that on here. It is certainly time to start doing that. I believe that that is one of the reasons we've started getting a few people call in saying, "Hey, my iPad storage is getting full." You know,
Right.
every 3 or 4 years that they just the file sizes get bigger for updates, and that takes up a lot of space on the iPad. So, do you have any updates on that?
Thank you for asking, Les. And I don't have an update available to share today, but know that we are actively working on, including in Seattle when we were there last week, we're actively working on the plan for that because we have to ensure that, of course, we have the inventory to do so. So we are actively working on that. Calls are being made, meetings are being had to ensure that we can get everything settled and then roll out a plan to get those done. So since Les mentioned it, and thank you for doing so, there is a plan team to start to take care of the iPad refreshes, and we're working on that. And as soon as I have a more definitive timeline and rollout plan and things like that that we've aligned on, I will definitely provide you an update, but we are working on inventory ASAP.
I remember the last number, at least when we started talking about this back in December, trying to get ahead of the game. I wanted to say it was somewhere around 180 iPads that need to be
Yeah.
replaced. That's a large task. So just so everybody knows, if your group has some older iPads that start with HL21, then be looking, over the next 6 months or so, we'll probably be replacing those in some
Yeah.
fashion. So,
Definitely. Thank you so much for calling that out. And
thank you.
hey, Joe, I see that you're here also. I just wanted to make sure that everything was good from yesterday, or did you have any questions, or you're all set?
So yes, it refreshed. I I shut it down and opened it back, and it popped back up. So I was able to forward it for the next day. But
Okay, perfect.
I do have a question.
Sure.
Yesterday, Miss Beth had put some information in on my report along in our headlight report, and it keeps locking my report, and then my report won't roll into Site Manager when somebody with greater authority than me does something, it locks my reports. Now I can edit my report, but it won't forward my report to Site Manager.
Okay. I'm just
And
taking
I'm
notes.
just checking my update. I think I need to update I don't think I'm updated. I don't think I delayed its version, so that may be possibly the problem.
Jimbo, are you getting a rejection notice or it just won't let you submit?
It won't let me submit. It it puts the little lock in the left top corner, and I can edit it, but when I forward it, when I submit it, Kyle, what's it doing? What does it tell you when you I'm talking to Kyle, our office guy.
When I review it, it kicks it back to draft.
When Kyle reviews it, he said he kicks it back to draft after he reviews it. But it rolled over this morning, right? Into Site Manager, right? It went into Site Manager, but it still shows in draft. And it looked like it happens every time someone with greater authority than me does something on the same day. If that makes sense.
Yes, it does. Thank you. Okay.
That's new to me.
Hey, do you mind sharing the project that's happening on?
Okay, you need the number?
Yeah, if you don't mind.
H.010.960.6 LA 30 roundabouts. LA 30 roundabouts.
All right, and what was I gonna say? What are the dates of those reports that's happening on, and when did it start happening?
It happened on the 15th, yesterday.
All right, cool. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Elijah. I appreciate it. Jimbo, that was Elijah, one of our teammates on this side, and he's
Okay.
This
Yeah.
is Beth.
Oh, hi, Ms.
Give y'all a little bit more information. I did not touch anything on Jimbo's reports. All I did yesterday on that job was create a sample for pipe gaskets, created a form and added my PDFs to that sample. I did not go into the DWRs. I did not go into field book. I was in the sampling plan to add my rubber gaskets to the correct line items and in materials and created a sample. And that's
Okay.
all I did.
Okay.
And I've done the same thing again this morning on that same project. So he may or may not have an issue again today.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you for the clarity there. And that's why I wanted to check in, Jimbo, just to see if we were still having those issues or if we needed to continue to look into that. So we're going to dig a little bit deeper, and I know how to contact you, and I'll have an update as soon as possible. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Sorry, Les.
Oh, you're good. I appreciate y'all bringing that up. You know, we've had a few little bugs here lately, and I want to make sure we get them all cleaned up. So, but
Perfect.
it's very possible that those two things are not related with Beth going in and doing a sample, but they could be. So I think if it happened again today, that might give us a little more information. So Jimbo, just let us know if you try to submit that report and you all review it and you get that same notification going back to draft.
Okay, no problem. Thank you.
And I tell you what, Jimbo, if you don't mind me chiming in also too, I can tell you from my experience that as you're uploading, whether it be a PDF or a supporting image to materials, it does show up in HeadLight Fieldbook as an observation as well.
Okay.
Yeah,
I see that. I see the one she did this morning. It shows us a file name with an attachment.
It could be possible that in your report, you could be grabbing that observation, but if you're using do you use My Daily to create your reports, or do you use just the regular LADOTD HDR?
I use My Daily.
Okay, well, you shouldn't be grabbing those observations that Beth are creating through the materials app if you're using My Daily, but
Okay.
But anyway, you know, Elijah and Tranisha have the information. They can check it out and maybe figure out what's going on there.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate y'all. All right, my turn. Thanks, Tranisha, for going over all that for us. And I have, let's see, 36 minutes. I think that'll cover it. Hopefully I won't go that long, but I do have a topic to go over today that could get extensive. And I'm kind of glad Luanna's here because this is related to some of the work she did when she was here. And I wanted to go over the ATM report. which is kind of crazy because I had a consultant reach out a couple weeks ago asking me if we had a video on how to create an ATM report in HeadLight. And I was like, oh, sure. Yeah, let me look it up. And I looked through every webinar we have, and I could not find any spot where we actually talked about how to do an ATM. So anyway, I said, well, I'll cover that on the webinar for sure. And so I've done some pre-work here and kind of laid out a document that I can follow along and try to make sure we get all the little details here. I do want to say, I'm actually very proud to say we have our first ATM that has been signed by the PE, the district lab engineer, and the area engineer, and has been submitted digitally to headquarters audit. So last week, I gave one of the ladies in audit a HeadLight login and showed her how to find that ATM. And then by ATM, remember, we're talking about the 2059. I know we're still having terminology issues there, but so she has been looking at that ATM digitally, and it looks like everything was there that they needed with all the signatures. And so we are one step closer to digital submittals at the final of a job. So, but anyway, I thought this would be a good opportunity to go over like how we create that ATM and maybe even some. I love Tranisha's doing her celebration over here. That's awesome. And so it's a good opportunity for us to go over how to create that. And just so far that we've not done very many of them. I do know there are 3 or 4 other ones in District 61 that are kind of on the way. And so I have learned a couple of tips and tricks also just with these few we've done. I wanted to share that with you today. So I'm gonna share my screen. If I can figure out which one, share this one. All right. Everybody good? You can see that? I think I'm on the sample plan right now. Sorry, let me get some of these controls out of my way because they're covering my document. For being patient with me. Okay, so where do we create it? There's actually 2 places in HeadLight currently where you can actually run an ATM, formerly 2059. And I'm going to start with field book. And I'm starting here because this is the place that you would go if somebody in your field unit created one and you wanted to see it. You can also create an ATM form in materials, but that only has a list of the forms that you create, not all the forms that were created on a project. So I thought it'd be best to start here. So on your left navigation, we have forms. You're going to click that and wait for it to load, of course. And you get a list of all the project forms that are in the job. Now, I'm just in the test project, and you can see there's close to 800 forms listed here. And you can see where I've even been testing a little bit, even this morning, putting an example ATM in here. But to create, it's just like everything else when you're creating an observation, those kind of things. We're going to go to the green plus there. And we are going to select in the drop down LADOTD ATM. This is what you're looking for. And I feel like even with the terminology struggles we have trying to call it 2059, maybe this is a little hard for people to pick out in this list. But anyway, now that we have video record of it, I feel like it's going to get a little easier. So LADOTD ATM is what you're looking for. Obviously, you can change the name of that, and I'll discuss that a little bit later. And then we're just going to do create. Now, I'm not going to create this because it does take a minute to run. I will say one of the better things about HeadLight ATM is it does not take as long as the report that's on our intranet or even LePave. It is a little faster to run this report, but I've already ran one here, so we'll just open this one up. Well, actually, it's been so long since I opened this, it might take a little while to load it. We'll see. Might be better just to generate a new one. Sorry about this. I was trying to save some time here, and it looks like it's going to take a little while to load it anyway. Oh, there we go. It wasn't too bad. All right, so this is the form that we use for the 2059 now, and you can see it's similar to our old form where it has some of your header information here, who the project engineer is, that's listed on. This is just whoever's in site manager. In fact, all of this information currently is being pulled from site manager. So we've got a contractor and, you know, the project number, all of the main things that you have to have there. You get a quick look at how many failing samples are on the job and how many errors and emissions are listed. And this is great to have this quick look, because one of the things we do, or what we would like you to do, is throughout the job, my recommendation is at least once a month, but you don't have to take my recommendation, just kind of as you see fit. Try to run this report. I like to call it an intermediate ATM, right? If you're running this once a month and taking a look at, oh, there's some failing samples, I need to know what, you know, I have to take action on those. So what do I do? This is a good place to come and get that information. And then following from there, we see that there's a signature line for the project engineer, the DLE, the district lab engineer, and the area engineer for the project. And we'll talk a little more about how the submitting and how getting those names in here works. Moving on down from that, we have the original sample plan, and this might cause some heartache here at first, but I'll just kind of show you what we're going to do. Now, the test project that we're looking at now actually has an original sample plan. They call it original sample plan. We use the term initial. They mean the same thing. What we are looking for is, there was actually a memo, was it a memo? No, an EDSM that came out prior to when Luana retired, that states that we would like to have, or part of the documentation is we have an initial sample plan and obviously a final sample plan in our 2059 ATM. And so what we want is for you to get that sample plan completed before the project starts. It would be great to have it before the pre-con, but that timing is very difficult to get it in there. But that's typically what we're supposed to do, is get that sample plan built out and signed off on prior to the pre-construction meeting. And so we'll just look at this real quick. The document this takes is the first document. So the one that shows up here in the original sample plan is the first document sample plan that gets signed off by the PE and the district lab engineer. And so it's just a basic form that tells you what your sample frequencies are. And of course, this is not correct because this is just our test project, but gives you an example of what it looks like. And we'll scroll all the way to the bottom. And this one was probably prior to getting it fixed, where it would show the DLE's name. But anyway, when you sign off, the project engineer will be here and the DLE will be here. So the question then comes up. I tell you what, before I move on to that, I'm going to skip back because I've kind of jumped ahead. So I showed you how to create this form in Fieldbook, but let's look at how to do it in materials, and this will only take a second. So when you open materials, you land on your samples, like your recent samples page. So if you select the hamburger menu or collapse menu button, I think it's the correct name for it. I'm not sure about that, but there's a section forms, and this pretty much mirrors what is in Fieldbook, except this is only the forms that you create, not every form that's in the list or that's in the project. Same thing, green plus button. We're going to do the project number, and then we're going to select that LADOTD ATM here and create. And I'm not going to do that because it'll take a few minutes for that to run, but just a simple way to show you how it can be done in materials or done in Fieldbook. All right, back to the ATM. So the question obviously comes up, all right, I want to do a HeadLight ATM and turn this into the lab and get it digitally signed, but I did not complete my initial sample plan in HeadLight. I did it in a Word document or whatever way your district has been doing initial sample plans. And so you have to, so when you do that, you're not going to have something show up in this display section, right? You're not going to have a document show up here if you did not get it signed off on. Well, if you're at the end of the project, and even if you did your sample plan in HeadLight later on in the project, that's not going to be a true initial. And so the workaround, and one of the great things about this version of ATM and why I really prefer HeadLight, is this QA supporting documentation here, where we can add files to the ATM. So it's not just what is in the database that gets pulled into the report, but you now have the ability to add what you want to the report, right? So any additional QA documentation you think should be in that ATM, there's a place for it. And it's real simple. We'll go to add file, and I made up a mock document so that this would show you how to do it. We'll go, I think I put it on my desktop, and initial sample plan. So say you just had a Word document. It's probably, you might have an Excel or something along those lines, but just say it's a Word document. You can just drop that file right in here, give it a title, initial sample plan. You could write a description of whatever you want to do, whatever you feel like needs to be done for documentation. Hit complete, and we're going to wait for it to load, because it takes a minute. Well, at least I hope it does. There we go. And so now you have the initial sample plan loaded here when you did not, this is the great to put it in here, when you did not have that original sample plan completed in HeadLight. So you're able to transition into this software from whatever way your district has been doing it before, even after the fact. And so that add file button is very useful in this situation. Before I go any further, any questions so far before I step into more? Okay. You guys can chime in at any time if you have a question about anything I'm saying here, but just moving on, end of project material assembly, and you can see everything is kind of collapsed down to make this document not so cumbersome to look at first. This is probably going to be your biggest section. So when we turn this on, the end of project material summary is all of these samples that were collected in the job. And so they are going to be categorized by line items and then item codes. The main thing that you want to do here, so say you're getting ready to submit your ATM at the end of the project, is we want to make sure that, or at least one of the things you have to check as a PE office, is making sure that this status is in an approved, I'm sorry, I think the term is authorized status, which is a pass, fail, let's see if I can find a fail, probably not one in here, a fail or an info. It would say pass, fail, info, or missing one, void, right? So those are the four things that we're looking for here. So if you say you run your intermediate ATM, just once a month, you decide to run this form, and you look through here and you see, let me go to the first one. Okay, so I see this is logged. All right. The DLE is not going to sign off on this form if there's a sample in a logged status. So you need to, take action, and maybe you didn't sample this or it was never received, got lost, whatever you need to do. It might become an error and omission, but you need to get the status changed to this. So maybe a void or something along those lines, but we need to make sure that we get the sample statuses taken care of. One thing that we've come upon lately, and you all should be aware of this, is that when the PE offices submit the asphalt roadway reports, so we have been creating a sample ID and then attaching an asphalt roadway report form to that sample ID. And so what you're going to end up with is a lot of sample IDs for asphalt where the roadway report is attached to it, but the lab generally does not do anything with the sample to change the status. Sometimes it can be received in the lab, but the lab does not input the test results into the sample ID that you create. And so I think the best thing to do at this current, and I've not really got a good answer on what we should be doing here, but I do know that the lab generally creates a sample ID for each roadway core that they get. And so there are, obviously other sample IDs besides the one that you send it in on. And so you're going to end up with either a lot of logged or received sample statuses here. So they're probably all going to need to be voided at the end of the job. And you can submit into the site manager admin group, or I guess it would be site manager materials group, to get those voided out if needed. But that brings up a good question, right? Well, what do I do to have proper documentation? And again, I'm gonna close this down because we kind of talked about what we need to talk about there. again, what I've been recommending, at least for the last couple that we've done, is you have an add file button here, right? And so let me close this out and see if I thought I had a asphalt packet. Okay,
So Les,
go ahead.
when you create the form in Headlight, it will automatically create a site manager number and it'll say logged. Then when it's brought to the lab and scanned in, it should go to received, but it will never go past that.
That's right. There are some labs, Kevin, that are not even receiving it with the scanner. I'm sure that you guys are in O2.
Sorry.
But some labs don't. And so, yeah, he's right. So if your lab is getting that core and they are scanning that in, it's going to sit there in a receive status, but those test results are not being entered there. What I've found, at least this is with District 61, is District 61 puts all of the test results for asphalt into the T drive and gives all of the PE offices access. And so that's where I got this packet from. So if you're getting a packet like this, just your asphalt packet at the end of the job, which is basically a report that the lab will put together for you, one thing I recommend doing is when they email that to you, go ahead and download it. Oh, I'm gonna put it on my desktop just for this demonstration. And then we're gonna add that file here as well. See if I can find where I just put it. There we go. And then we're going to do complete and let that load up.
You should be able to, in LePave though, you should be able to print out the
That's right. You can go. Thanks for bringing that up. You can just go to LePave and download those documents. In fact, part of the 2059 ATM is you have to have all the mix designs, and audit looks at that. And so having those here would be great as well. So you can call it asphalt packet or whatever, but it needs to be labeled something that's easy for anybody who's reviewing this project can find it. And so, yeah, but thanks for that, Kevin. You can just get that stuff from LePage.
because it gives you the pay and everything.
That's right. Yep. And so you can add that in here. I believe another thing that you could add here that's required is maybe any rebar documentation that's, I forget what the term is called, but anyway, that's part of the 2059 ATM is having that rebar file added here. And so you can do that as well. One thing I thought of earlier, and this is unlikely and would not always happen, but I thought I'd share it because I felt like it would be pretty good. So say that you had something that was not on the AML, right, our approved materials list, but you wanted to, but say there was a decision made by the PE or whoever, the PE requested to use this material, and you added that into the project, like you incorporated that material, and it necessarily didn't go along with what our specs say, even if it was just a trial or something along those lines. I think this would be a good idea to do. So I saw Kevin had uploaded a couple of looks like these 250 bar couplers right here. So one thing I would do is I'm going to do a narrative, and of course I already had something typed up here. And we're going to add some text. So just say that you had that you wanted to do a justification for using that material. Right. And so we're going to create another observation here. And I'm just going to show you a way that we could get this into the report. So we would select that, and then we have some other documentation here going along with that. Just a justification of why we used it, why we incorporated that into the project. We're going to create a document, change the name here as well, so it just doesn't look like a report. Maybe even add a sample ID there. And then it's going to end up being in the cart here. This is your report card, just like all other reports that we submit. And so you could download this PDF and have a copy of it. download it to your computer, and drop that into the ATM here as well. So under add file, you could actually have material justifications here. So if I'm a PE, like anything that happened like that, I would be adding that documentation to the ATM, right? And letting everybody know, like, one of the best things about HeadLight is the ability to put everything on the table. Like, this is what we did, and this is the justification we have for what we did and the engineering decisions we made. And so you're able to add those files here. Any questions before I move on? Okay. All right, so we talked about end of project material summary. Now this is kind of the same thing, just with the failing samples. It's just a quicker summary of any sample that failed on the job. And this is the heart of what the lab looks at, right? Like, they look and, in the end of project material summary and check those statuses and that kind of thing. That's important here. But what we really want to do is we want to make sure that we are covered on our failing samples. And so we did have a failing sample in the test project. It looks like I have a slump in an air that failed. And so this gives me the list of that. Now, the thing that goes along with this material of summary of failing samples, we're going to skip over this one, is the disposition of failing samples. So I'm going to go ahead and display that. And so you can see this is the same sample, so 83,912 and 83,912. So these match up. So this means I went in and entered a disposition for this failing sample. So it's pretty easy to go in here, and every sample ID, you need to verify and make sure you have a disposition of failing samples for that ID. And so if you have 6 failing samples here, you should have 6 dispositions. Just real quick, I'll show you where we do dispositions in case somebody doesn't know. So materials, dashboard. Oh, sorry, that's the wrong one. And then we're going to be looking at the third dashboard here that says failing samples. This might take a minute to load. Oh, it switched back. Okay, so failing samples. So this just gives you a list of all your failing samples, and this is the easy place to put the disposition that shows up in the ATM. And so you can see here, looks like I was testing out how many characters this thing would actually hold. So you could actually type a long disposition here, but usually it's just edit disposition and you can add text, right? And save that, and that would show back up in the ATM. So you might have a list here of samples that you'll need to add a disposition to. Super easy compared to what we used to have to do. Seems like, I think in Site Manager there is a place to put your dispositions, but it was not the easiest thing to do. I feel like I used to just make a Word document with a bunch of dispositions and turn it in with the 2059. So okay, so we talked about material failing, summary of failing samples and the dispositions and how those relate. Now let's talk about errors and omissions. Obviously, so I do have one error and omission put in here. So just say something was forgotten, you forgot to sample something on a job. Your error and omission might be inspector failed to obtain a sample for the hay or whatever it is. I guess I can do real quick where we enter an error and omission to make it show up there as well. So I'll just choose as clearing and grubbing. I think I have a sample type in here. Yeah, so once you get your example type where you would change your rate and frequency, conversion factor, those kind of things, there's a little checkbox here. And when you check it, you can enter the error and omission there and save it, and that will put the error and omission into the ATM in this part of the report. Super simple. I like having one piece of software that you can do all this in, right? Well, I say one piece of software, it's really 3. It's field book, materials, and sample plan. But knowing how those 3 work together, it makes it a little easier to get everything put in. So let me check this and make sure I went through everything. I know I went through all of these things, and we talked about the QA documentation. So you have to have your mixed designs put in. Those are easy to get from LaPave, or if you get that asphalt report from a lab. Okay, so that's pretty much all of the part. Oh, let me talk about this real quick. Discussion. So intermediate ATMs, I feel like this is more useful for, but could be used on the final ATM. That you can actually have a side discussion here. So if you look at, say you run a report, you run an ATM 1 month after the estimate, and you find some things that are wrong, you can put some comments here. Now, this does not notify somebody, but it's at least a place for you to keep your thoughts in order for your inspectors to fix. Say, hey, go look at the intermediate I just ran. I listed 5 things in there that you all need to make sure we get sampled this month, or make sure that we get those statuses changed. Like this sample was logged. Why didn't the lab receive this? And so this is a good place to have that discussion and have a record of it, right? So let's talk about, I think the one thing I did not go over was how do you get the names here, right? So that's the main thing. One of the tips we've learned so far is that I know sometimes the Tech 7 or an EI in your office is the one who puts all this stuff together. But one thing we found is that the project engineer is the one who needs to generate the final ATM. Okay, now I'm going to go back here and just show you one thing of how we do that. So in this, where's the ATM I had? Looks like I might have changed it to something else, or it's just gone. There's an ATM in here somewhere, I'm sure. Okay, well, I don't know where it went, but anyway, we'll just pick one. Okay, so let's just pretend that this was the ATM form. You can go here. Oh, I'm sorry, this one's locked. I can't do that there. Bear with me. Did I break it? All right, so let me find something that's in a draft. Okay, so you can change the name of an ATM here if it's still in draft. Now, the one thing I want to emphasize is if you run an intermediate ATM, like we were talking about once a month or something along those lines, you don't necessarily have to rename that because you're not using that document. But for the district lab engineer or their representative to find the final one, I definitely recommend renaming it. If audit is looking at it, of course, they're going to need to know which one it is. Now, they will know because it's in an approved status where the rest of them are probably have not gone out of draft. But I just, sorry, I don't know what I did there. So just rename it final ATM. And then when you click away from it, it should have changed the name there. It probably did. Okay, so here's one that says final ATM. I guess this was it. So you just want it to be very easy at the end of the project for that DLE to know which one they need to go in and sign. Let's go back. That's not an ATM. So let's go back to this. So we talked about to get the PE's name here. So the PE is going to create the form, and you're going to have to add all of the documentation, that kind of stuff, or get your representative in your office to help you, get your Tech 7 to help if you need to get them to do it. But it has to be generated with your account, I think is what I'm trying to say there. When you go into actions, well, it looks like there's some unsaved changes here. Let me save it. They're not saving. Okay, so I finally got it saved. I don't know what I had to do there, but when the PE submits the document, that puts it into a status of submitted. Then the P, oh, why is it not? Okay, there we go. So then the PE is going to go back in a second time into the collapse menu button and approve. When the PE hits approve, that puts the PE's name here. Obviously, put mine because I'm the one logged in. Right. And so then you can just shoot an email or call the district lab engineer and say, hey, I have an ATM ready for you on this project. They have logins, they can just go look for it. It might not give me the option to sign the district lab engineer. When the district lab engineer logs in, their name should be listed in the users that can edit the document, and they will have an approve. They hit approve, they send an email back to you as the PE saying, hey, I've signed my part of it, or they can forward it right on to the area engineer, right? Because we have an area engineer signature as well. When the area engineer logs in, they do the same thing. They hit approve, area engineer signs it. The form is completely locked down, and that's your final ATM. So the process is not too difficult. We were able to get through it. Like I said, we have that one that's turned in already. Any questions on signing it? Pretty straightforward. Okay. Some of the tips that we learned, P has to generate it with their login. The report needs to be renamed to something along the lines of final ATM. And we talked about how you add signatures. And I think that was all the tips that we had right there at the end. Like I said, it was super nice for that person in audit to just log in and say, okay, I can see everything I need to see, right? And if they want to print it, they can print it at this point, but at least from our side, from construction and in our labs standpoint, we are submitting this thing digital. Now, if audit has to print something out to turn it in, finally, they can do that. Okay. I said a lot, and we only got a couple minutes left, so I'm going to stop my share. And we can talk about it if you have any questions, but I'm happy we can finally get something recorded and have some type of training on this, because it looks like there are lots of people that are at least investigating the possibility of turning their ATM 2059 in this way on the projects they've been using HeadLight for. All right, no questions. I explained it perfectly. Anybody see anything?
Les,
Go ahead, Luana.
I am so excited that y'all are continuing with all this good work, and it looks so good. And I can't believe the meeting that I dropped in on is ATM.
I know. I was
Thank
very
you.
happy to see you. I thought that you would
Made
really
my day.
enjoy this one. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, Luana did a lot of work along these lines prior to her retiring, and so I'm glad she at least gets to hop on here and see some of the fruit of that labor. So we appreciate her. All right, that's all I have.
Les,
Go
one
ahead.
more.
Yep. Yeah.
If we're adding PDFs to samples, like what Kevin showed us earlier, and I'm now doing,
Mhm.
will those get pulled into the ATM, or are we going to have to go add them to that add file and add all of our certificates again?
So I'm really glad you brought that up, because I forgot to talk about that. And it looks like I probably closed everything. So one of the things we have on our list with HeadLight, one of the things they're working on, and I feel like we're getting pretty close on it, is we have asked them to, let me share, because I think this will be easier to show. And I know we're getting close on time, but this is important and something that really needs to be explained. So in the end of project material summary, you guys can't see this, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Now I've locked this thing, and so it might not let me display. Let me go to I don't know what the best way is to show this, because you're gonna have to find an unlocked ATM since I locked that one down. Of course, there's only one. Well, maybe I won't be able to share this. So in the end of project material summary, where it lists all the sample IDs, HeadLight is working on a hot link for every one of those samples. And so let's say you want to, and it's not in there now. So currently, I believe that the lab has the ability to log in and look at the samples and like go look at those supporting documents like your CDs and CAs and stuff. They can see all that in HeadLight now, but it's not as easy for them to review as when we get this part fixed. I want to say there was it this one? I think this might give you a good example of what I'm talking about. Okay, so this is some of the work they've already started doing it. So see how the sample is hot linked here with a hyperlink? So if there, I don't know if there is a form on this one, but if it is, so you'll just be from the ATM, like from the final form, they'll just be able to click on the sample, let the sample load, and it's going to give all the sample information here, obviously. One thing also I do want to mention, all of this time, this loading time that we're currently seeing is because HeadLight has to look at all of our database to pull this information. Once we're HeadLight only, they're only looking at their database, and these speeds will get, I would say, dramatically faster. Anyway, while this is loading, so then they'll be able to scroll down and see your supporting documentation. So it gives them an easy way to review those samples. Yeah. So then they would just be able to go into the roadway report or CD or whatever it is. But I'm glad you brought that up. Currently, you might have to create a file and well, let's say there's two things about that. I'm gonna stop my share again. So one of the things we've been talking about is how you create one sample ID and you continue to add the documentation to that one sample ID. That's pretty easy for the lab to see, right? If they only have to go to one sample ID for all of the, rebar CAs or CCs or whatever we get from rebar, then that's pretty easy for them to do. Is when they have to look through hundreds of samples to find that could be a problem. And I would say that the review of the ATM will take a little longer in its current state. But when we get those hyperlinks, I feel like that's the key to making this thing really fast for the review process. Does that help you when I explain there, Beth?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the short answer is no, we won't have to do it twice.
Short answer, yes. As soon as we get those hot links, no. But I do recommend, even though everything's digital, if you're keeping good records, like good files on your computer or whatever of your CDs, it's pretty easy to drop them in there all at one time. And so that would be helpful at first, but definitely not going to have to be doing that. Yeah. I really appreciate that question. So that's something that needs to be talked about. All right. We're over time. Anybody have anything else? All right. That's all I had. Tranisha, do you have anything before we leave?
No, that's all. Thank you all so much for your time, and I look forward to seeing you next month or sooner.
Yep. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate y'all jumping on. Y'all have a good rest of your day.
All right. Thanks, Les.